Anna, once despised by society but chosen by God, is a character whose life plays an important, but largely unknown, role in the most profound story of all time. Her story, obscured for centuries and virtually absent from the traditional Bible, appears in apocryphal works, especially the Proto-Evangelium of James, a text unfamiliar to many people today. This raises the question, why was Anna, Jesus' grandmother, omitted from the Bible verses we often read? How could a figure so instrumental in God's plan be hidden from canonical documents? To unravel this mystery, we go back to the formative years of early Christianity, when church leaders meticulously decided which texts would form the New Testament. James's Proto-Evangelium, detailing Anna's journey and Mary's miraculous birth, was eventually ruled out as apocryphal, despite its importance in early Christian circles. It was pushed aside, possibly because its detailed focus was inconsistent with the theological priorities of the time. Yet Anna's inspiring story of resilience and divine purpose remains preserved in this ancient text, quietly waiting to be rediscovered. This incredible story begins with a surprising fact that very few people know. Anna, grandmother of Jesus, is a woman despised by men but chosen by God to participate in the greatest plan ever devised, born the mother of Jesus our Messiah. In her time, Anna lived under the shadow of contempt and grumbled because she was barren. In that context, infertility is not simply difficulty in having children, it means shame, rejection, and worst of all, being considered abandoned by God. Imagine what it would have meant to be sterile for a woman in that era. It was not only a personal tragedy but also a public shame. However, what made Anna's situation even more desperate was that she belonged to David's royal line, the line from which, according to prophecies, the Messiah would be born. However, Anna cannot conceive. Year after year, her womb remained empty and the whispers around her became more and more cruel. How could a barren woman belong to the lineage that gave birth to the Son of God? To understand her struggle, we must grasp the spiritual and social context of Israel at the time. The people of God, under foreign domination, searched with all their hearts for a sign, a divine intervention. The prophecies spoke of the coming of the Messiah, a direct descendant of David, who would liberate them. Every woman of that lineage carries the burden of that expectation, but few, like Anna, feel close to despair. In Israel at that time, barrenness was considered a sign of divine rejection. This stigma is not unique to Anna but is part of a culture that views fertility as a direct blessing from God and infertility as a divine punishment. In those days, women like Anna had no place of honor. Their identity is tied to their ability to bear children. And if they can't, they will be pushed into oblivion. However, God had other plans. Although men despised her, God chose her. And this is when the real revelation begins. While men saw her as an insignificant and forgotten woman, God was preparing her for a great mission. Anna, who was abandoned by society, will be chosen to bring into the world the mother of the Messiah. Isn't it amazing? God does not choose those who are honored by the world, but those who are willing to follow His plan, even when everything seems lost. The story continues, illustrating Anna's life as she faces tests of faith, ultimate miracles, and her role in the divine plan that will ultimately bring salvation to humanity. Her faith, resilience, and undying hope are highlighted as a testament to how God often works in mysterious ways, choosing the humble and overlooked to accomplish His purposes. Anna was born into a noble family, a direct descendant of King David, at a time when the people of Israel had great expectations. From an early age, her life was surrounded by stories of God's ancient promises to her ancestors, especially the prophecy that from her lineage would come the Messiah, Savior of the world. She grew up in a deeply spiritual environment, with a strong sense of responsibility for her faith and heritage. In her family, stories about the great King David were not only family stories but also constant reminders of the burden that weighed on her family. One day, someone in her lineage will bring salvation. As Anna grew older, that responsibility increased even more. Her education was not only religious but also cultural. As a descendant of David, young Anna was destined for great things. Society at that time looked at her with hope and expectation. Her marriage was not simply a union of love or convenience. For many, it will be a step toward the fulfillment of sacred promises. Her family and community saw her as a bearer of promise, one who could give birth to the Messiah. When she was young, Anna met Joachim, a man of noble lineage and deep faith. Both share a spiritual heritage and devotion to God's promises. Their marriage was celebrated with enthusiasm, and for many it was only a matter of time before Anna gave birth to the long-awaited descendant of King David who would bring salvation to the world. But this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The years begin to pass, and with each year the long-awaited child is not born. Expectations turn into pressure. Anna, like her husband, knew that children were considered a direct blessing from God in their culture. Women who cannot conceive are often considered cursed or punished for some hidden reason. What begins as a bit of worry gradually turns into darkness that haunts her daily life. Prayers that were once filled with hope are now tinged with sadness and despair. The community that once looked at them with respect and admiration began to whisper. Sympathetic looks quickly turned into judgmental looks. Some people will say, if God did not give them children, perhaps there is something that we do not know. Women would speak softly as Anna passed by, whispering questions about why God hadn't blessed her with motherhood. Is there some hidden sin in her life that makes her unworthy of having children? At that time, infertility was not only an emotional burden but also a sign of public disrespect. The weight of these expectations is not only social but also mental. Anna and Joachim prayed day and night, asking God for an answer, asking for a sign that they were not forgotten. Anna, in particular, faces an internal struggle. She knew she was part of the line destined to give birth to the Messiah, but heaven remained silent. Her faith, though steadfast, began to be tested like never before. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Despair began to creep into their hearts. Although Joachim is always by her side, he also brings his own sadness. In their society, infertility is often attributed more to women than to men, but both suffer equally. Visits to the temple, which were once spiritual moments of unity, have become painful reminders of their unanswered prayers. Even during religious festivals where God's people gathered to celebrate, Anna and Joachim felt the burden of their emptiness. As each day passed, their hearts shrank a little, but their faith, though tested, did not falter. It is a daily struggle, a constant tug-of-war between hope and discouragement. Joachim also suffered extreme pain as he watched the woman he loved suffer in silence. However, he couldn't help but feel that the community's gaze grew colder with each festival and each communal prayer. One day, after a particularly long day of prayer, Joachim decided to retreat into the desert. According to the tradition of the patriarchs, like Abraham and Moses before him, he sought solitude to listen to the voice of God. The shame and pressure of not having an heir made him feel unworthy, and he felt distant even from the pious people in his community. In the desert, he prayed to God for an answer, for comfort, or at least an understanding of why their deepest desires were being denied. While Joachim was in the desert, praying in solitude, filled with wonder, Anna was at home, immersed in a prayer so intense that her spirit seemed to break with every word she muttered. What else could she do? She had prayed all her adult life, yet God's silence still surrounded her. Society, priests, even the women around her began to think that God had turned away from her. However, Anna remained loyal. Her indomitable spirit, though wounded by despair, refused to yield. Perhaps she thought there was something she didn't understand, a larger plan in which her life and pain were being used for a greater purpose. It was in this moment of profound suffering, in the midst of what seemed an abyss of sacred silence, that something extraordinary happened. According to the account in James's Proto-Evangelium, as Anna prayed under the tree, a radiant light shone around her. Suddenly, a celestial figure appeared before her. An angel of the Lord appeared, bringing news that would change her life forever. The angel spoke to her with words full of tenderness and power. "Anna, Anna, God has heard your prayer. You will conceive and give birth to a child, and your lineage will be famous throughout the earth." In an instant, the weight of years of pain and contempt disappeared. Anna, who has spent her entire life believing that she has been forgotten by God, now hears from the mouth of a celestial messenger that not only will she be blessed with a child, but that this child will be very special, to be destined for a divine purpose beyond what she could. Any mother can dream. The angel's promise was not simply an answer to her desire to become a mother, but also an announcement of a heavenly mission. At the same time, in the desert, Joachim was also visited by an angel. As he was praying alone, feeling unworthy and isolated, an angel of the Lord appeared in the midst of his grief and said, "Do not be afraid, Joachim. God has heard your prayers. Anna, your wife, will conceive a child, and that child will be a good child in the sight of the Lord." Surprise and joy filled Joachim's heart. The divine message immediately dispelled years of anguish, and he quickly prepared to return to Anna and share the incredible news. When Joachim returned from the desert, he saw Anna radiant with a light he had never seen on her face. He knew, without words, that what he experienced in the desert was no dream. God spoke to both of them. The silence of many years was broken by a sacred promise. The doubts and whispers of the community no longer matter. Both knew that God, in His infinite wisdom, had a perfect plan far greater than any human plan. The following months were filled with joy that is hard to describe in words. Anna, who had suffered for decades, finally felt her heart was restored. And just as the angel promised, Anna became pregnant. Inside her, she carries the fruit of years of prayer, a divine miracle that will change history forever. But this child is not just another descendant of the house of David. She will be the mother of the one who brings salvation to the world, Mary, mother of Jesus. The birth of Mary is living proof of God's faithfulness. Anna and Joachim, once despised by society, now find themselves at the center of God's plan to redeem the world. God has chosen what humans have rejected, showing that His ways and timing are perfect, though often mysterious to us. And it is here that Anna's story teaches us a profound truth. God hears the most sincere prayers and deepest desires, even when it seems that heaven remains silent. Through Anna's life, we can see that God's plan exceeds all human expectations. What seemed to be a story of sadness and rejection turned into the basis for the coming of the Savior. Time passes, the long-awaited day has arrived. Anna, who is old, experienced the greatest miracle of her life. She gave birth to a baby girl named Mary. According to apocryphal tradition, it is believed that this miracle occurred when Anna was about 60 years old, the age when all possibility of conception seemed to have disappeared. However, as the Bible teaches, nothing is impossible with God. Anna, who had been despised and discriminated against because she was sterile, witnessed a divine intervention so extraordinary that it transformed not only her life but that of all humanity. Holding her daughter in her arms, Anna felt a peace she had never known before. This child, whose birth was announced by the angel, was not only the answer to her deepest longing, but also a fundamental part of God's great plan of redemption. Mary will not be just an ordinary child. She was destined to become the mother of the Savior, the long-awaited Messiah, Throughout her life, Anna was considered abandoned by God, but now, in her old age, God honored her by giving her an unimaginable blessing. Mary's birth not only brought joy to the lives of Anna and Joachim but was also a sign of God's power and faithfulness. This miracle child was not conceived when Anna was young but when all human possibilities were eliminated. Once again, God shows that He works in His own time and that His ways are beyond our understanding. Anna and Joachim, despite their difficult lives, always kept their faith. Years of prayer, weeping and supplication were not in vain. Now, with Mary in her arms, Anna understands that all the pain and waiting are part of a plan much larger than she ever imagined. Mary is not only the fulfillment of her personal desire to become a mother, but also the promise that God made to the people of Israel. From her lineage will come the Savior. Anna and Joachim's care for Mary was profound, for they knew that she was not only their child but also someone chosen by God for a higher purpose. As Mary grew up, Anna observed that her daughter demonstrated a purity and devotion to God that was far beyond the ordinary. Anna and Joachim knew that this special child was destined for something big, something that would transcend their lives and those around them. Mary grew up under the loving care of her parents, but most importantly under the kind and wise gaze of Anna. Although Mary was consecrated to the temple, her early years were spent in the family home, where her mother instilled in her the values and teachings of the faith to prepare her for her future. Miss Anna, who was well versed in the promises God had made through the generations of Israel, saw a special light in her daughter. She knew that this child, miraculously given to her in her old age, was destined for something far beyond the ordinary. As Mary grew up, Anna told her great stories of their faith, reminded her of the promises made to her ancestor David, recounted the exploits of the prophets, and above all, taught her trust in God's mysterious plans, which sometimes defy humans. Logic. With deep spiritual sensitivity, Anna cultivated in Mary a pure, open, and receptive heart to God's will. Moments of prayer are central to both of their lives. Often, Anna and Mary retreated together to a corner of the house, where they held hands and prayed silently, asking for wisdom and strength. In these moments of sacred communion, Anna saw in her daughter's eyes a peace and devotion almost beyond human reach. She knew that God's Spirit was working in an extraordinary way in Mary's life. However, Anna's life was not without difficulties. As an older woman who gave birth late, her physical strength could not always support her and she often suffered from fatigue. But the burden of her responsibilities never dampened her enthusiasm for mentoring Mary. She knew her time with Mary was limited, and she wanted to leave her the most important legacy of her steadfast faith in the God of Israel. Mary watched her mother with admiration, the gentleness with which Anna faced difficulties, the grace with which she endured the rumors of those who still remembered her years of infertility, and the profound conviction that never oscillate. This is a school of life for little Mary. Anna is not only a mother but also a living example of what it means to trust God's plans, even when they seem confusing. As Anna's life progressed into her final years, she looked back with a heart filled with gratitude. The child she gave birth to in her old age, the same child conceived as a response to years of suffering and prayer, was now destined to bring the greatest gift to the world, Jesus, Son of God. Anna moved from the darkness of contempt to the light of divine grace, and her story remains an inspiration to all who keep the flame of faith alive in the midst of despair. Anna's life is a powerful reminder that God's timing is not ours, and when all seems lost, He is quietly at work, preparing the way for blessings greater than ours. We can imagine. Sometimes, God's plan reveals itself when we have lost all hope, showing us that our efforts, however painful, are part of a divine purpose that is beyond our understanding. As the years passed, Anna saw in Mary maturity and wisdom far beyond her youth. She knew that her years of prayer and spiritual preparation had borne fruit. Although life in Nazareth was simple, the events taking shape in Mary's heart were intended to change the course of history. The time came for Mary to be taken to the temple, fulfilling the promise that Anna and Joachim had made in prayer, that if God gave them a child, they would dedicate that child to his service. Anna's heart was filled with pride and sadness. She knew this was God's purpose for her daughter, but having to say goodbye to her daughter was still very painful. Yet, as she did throughout her life, Anna trusted that God's plan was greater than her own wishes and desires. This act of consecration reflects Anna's deep gratitude and devotion to God. Although sad to say goodbye to her daughter, Anna understood that Mary was not only a gift for her but also for the whole world. With a heart full of faith, Anna entrusted Mary to the temple, trusting that God's plan was unfolding mysteriously but perfectly. The ways in which Mary, like Anna, learned to place her life in God's hands. The spiritual education that Anna provided was so important that years later, when the angel Gabriel appeared with the announcement that she would be the mother of the Messiah, Mary responded with words that still resonate. Hope to this day, behold, I am the servant of the Messiah. Lord, do it to me as you have commanded. This willingness to accept God's will without reservation, even in the face of the unknown, was something Mary learned from observing her mother, Anna. Anna, with her wisdom and devotion, became a pillar in Mary's life. However, as with any journey of faith, hers must come to an end. According to apocryphal accounts, Anna lived to see her daughter grow into a young woman full of grace, but did not live to witness the events that followed. She was not there when her grandson Jesus was born in Bethlehem, nor did she see the growth of the Savior's ministry. However, with the promise of a bright future in her heart, Anna closed her eyes for the last time, entrusting Mary into God's hands. Even though Anna did not know Jesus in an earthly sense, her legacy continued through the teaching she imparted to Mary. The young woman who married Joseph began a new phase in her life, one that would eventually lead her to become the mother of the Savior. It is said that Mary, when interacting with Saint Joseph, remembered the lessons Anna had taught her about faith, humility, and trust in God. Anna's life, although discreet and silent compared to the great characters in the Bible, is still a powerful testament to how God uses ordinary people to accomplish His extraordinary purposes. Through her example of faith, Mary was shaped to become the mother of Jesus, and her spiritual influence reached far beyond her hometown of Nazareth. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that our sacrifices and suffering can have an everlasting impact on generations to come. Her story invites us to reflect on how our heritage can be a light in the darkness, guiding others on the path to God. Now I invite you to close your eyes for a moment and think about Anna's life. Let her story resonate in your heart, remembering that although the road may be difficult and the suffering may seem endless, there is a divine purpose in every experience. Think about God's promises to you. Remember that while we may not always understand God's plans, they are filled with love and purpose. So, with a deep spiritual connection and echoes of faith, we conclude our exploration of the life of Anna, mother of Mary and grandmother of Jesus, the story of a woman whose love and devotion to God resonates through the generations. If this story touches your heart, I invite you to leave a comment below and share your experiences. Thanks for your time.